Welcome to today's online Keynote webcast to talk about what's new in Icenium, cross-platform mobile development simplified. We're really excited to have you here with us. As always, before we get started, a few notes because it's always crunching the internet when we get this many thousand of people together at one time. If you have any glitches during today's online Keynote, make sure that you check out our YouTube channel afterwards. Everything's being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it all perfectly in HD afterwards. And also, make sure that you follow us at Icenium on Twitter so that you can get all the latest updates for future Icenium releases, as well as find out whether or not you're a winner in today's raffle. Because we've got some great prizes raffling away today, including an iPad, as well as an iPad mini, Nexus 10, Nexus 4, some really great devices, and of course, 50 annual Icenium subscriptions. So there's a lot of great stuff going out today. You can visit the official webcast page for all the details and legalese around participation, but just by being here, you're in that raffle, so good luck to everybody. My name is Todd Anglin, and I will be your MC and your host for today's event, and I'm EVP for Cross-Platform Tools and Services at Telerik. If you want to follow me online or if you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Todd Anglin on Twitter. And of course, anytime you want to contact me, you can find me there. We've got a lot of great things to look at, but first, a big number to share, 40,000. More than 40,000 mobile projects have already been started with Icenium, and we couldn't be happier. We are watching our customers come out and create some amazing things using Icenium and Kendo UI Mobile. And before we look at what's new in Icenium today, I think it's worth stepping back for a minute to recognize why we're here. We're all here today because we believe mobile development is important. And we don't have to look far to find support for that in the industry, from stats like this from Business Intelligence, which show us that smartphones and tablets are rapidly outpacing the growth of traditional desktop and notebook computers, which in turn is leading to us for developers a challenge where we used to be able to build for one platform and one form factor, Windows and desktop keyboards and mice. Now we've got multiple operating systems and multiple form factors, all making our life as a developer targeting mobile a bit more complicated. Fortunately, though, there is some simplification out of the mix of different operating systems, because a lot of us have now started to focus on a few key platforms. In fact, according to a recent Vision Mobile survey, 84% of developers now use iOS, Android, or HTML5 as their main platforms, followed, of course, by Windows Phone and others. So what we learned then is that while the mobile development industry is exploding and there are lots of platforms and lots of form factors, it's really become a 3 or 4 horse race between iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and HTML5 for where you need to apply your attention. And the challenge, of course, is that it's always going to be different depending on the kinds of apps you're creating, which of these platforms and which of these skill sets you need. And that's because this simply is true. One size does not fit all. Whether we're talking mobile software or desktop or web software, every application is unique, from the different audiences it serves, like B2B, B2C, and even B2E, to the different kinds of functionality the apps need to have, rich visual applications to quickly changing line of business applications. And as a result, there are different ways to go about solving the mobile problem, from using native development to unlock the full richness of devices, to using web to have maximum reach to reach the most number of people anywhere an HTML5 browser can be found. But fortunately with mobile, we have another option. We have hybrid development. And it's this hybrid development that Icenium really helps us tackle. It helps us blend the best of both, some of the richness of native with the reach of web, to really reach the fastest, or rather the largest number of users with our mobile applications. So mobile development is important, and as a result, you need a complete mobile toolbox. So before we go even deeper into the Icenium updates for today, let me briefly update you on a couple of exciting developments in some of Telerik's other mobile products, namely Kendo UI and Icenium Everlive, our mobile backend as a service. First, in Kendo UI, we recently introduced 2 things that mobile developers will find particularly interesting. First, everybody knows that right now iOS 7 is in the news, and we have already shipped complete iOS 7 support in Kendo UI Mobile. That means a brand new iOS 7 theme along with support for the new gestures, the gesture-based navigation in iOS 7. So if you want your mobile apps to look and feel like iOS 7, Kendo UI Mobile already has you covered. Meanwhile, we've also been investing a lot of energy in trying to figure out how do you get the maximum performance out of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS on a mobile device. And the result of that research has really unlocked even greater performance improvements in Kendo UI Mobile, and it led to the creation of a brand new theme, the new flat theme, which some of you may have already seen. Between this new theme and the improvements that we've baked into Kendo UI and Kendo UI Mobile, you can now extract maximum performance from your hybrid and your mobile web applications. We hope you guys will check those improvements out. Meanwhile, in Icenium Everlive, we've also delivered a couple of major improvements. First, push notifications, or cross-platform push notifications, now make it easy for you to schedule and target your notifications across devices like Windows Phone, Android, and iOS. And we've also very recently added granular permissions, making it super easy to manage permissions of who can access the objects and the data that you're storing inside of Icenium Everlive. So if you've not looked at those improvements, check those out as well. But what we're really here today to talk about is Icenium, and something that we're very excited, we think many of you here today are going to enjoy, and that is our brand new integration with Visual Studio, one of the world's most popular IDEs. So what we'll do today then is start with a very brief recap of Icenium, Icenium 101 for those of you who are joining us for the first time today. Then we'll take a look at the brand new Visual Studio integration, show you exactly how it works, and walk through building an application using that integration. And then we'll wrap up with a look at custom hybrid plugins, or rather custom Apache Cordova plugins, the things that make hybrid applications powerful by unlocking additional native capabilities. So let's start then with a little Icenium 101. What is it that Icenium is really doing and helping you improve? Well, the cool thing about hybrid development in general is that you can create an application that targets many different devices with one code base. Write your code in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and use the Cordova proxy to access native device SDKs, and then you can take that code and run it everywhere. But there's a little catch. The hybrid promise on its own is incomplete, because to take that one code base and compile it to run everywhere, you still need to create native application packages. Which means to target iOS, you need Xcode and a Mac. To target Android, you need the Android SDKs and typically an IDE like Eclipse and a Mac or a PC. And to target Windows Phone, you need Visual Studio and a PC and places where you can run .NET. So while hybrid gives you one code base, it's not solved the problem of simplifying your mobile development. You still have all these different configurations and different tool sets that you have to configure if you really want to make apps that reach the most popular devices. Icenium solves that by leveraging the power of the cloud to take care of all the SDKs and all the building and packaging for the different platforms. So you can take your one code base and now have one workflow to build, deploy, debug all of these applications for all of these different platforms. Today for iOS and Android, and soon for Windows Phone as well. And beyond just the cloud-based packaging, which of course is very important, the value that Icenium really adds are all the other things that make mobile development faster, like the mobile-focused IDE or the rich visual app designer, to the things like the multi-device simulators, or the cross-platform device simulators, debuggers, deployment help, as well as live sync, so you can quickly see your changes on your devices. Icenium, in brief, is the fastest way to build, debug, and deploy cross-platform mobile apps. But we know from our surveying of developers that while Icenium is great for that mobile-focused experience, developers love their tools, and some tools more than others, as it turns out. In fact, Telerik surveyed developers several months ago, and we found that 72% of developers are unwilling to change their IDE, and 40% of developers are unwilling to change their source control. So if you're in one of those two categories, or perhaps both, Icenium today presents a bit of a challenge because you have to use the Icenium tools to do all of your mobile development. With the release this week of Icenium's Visual Studio integration, you finally can leverage the power of Icenium with the tools and the workflows that you love. It's truly the best of both worlds. You can build cross-platform mobile apps using all the tools you love. But rather than talk about it, I think it's best to see it, to really get a grip of what we're doing here that you're going to like. So I'm going to invite to our digital stage our first presenter, Jim Cowart, developer advocate at Telerik, to walk us through this new Visual Studio integration and show us how the power of Icenium is now coming into your favorite IDE. So Jim, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Todd, and good morning, afternoon, evening, whichever is most appropriate to you. Thanks a ton for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm very excited to share about the Icenium Visual Studio extension. I like to think of it as getting the best of both worlds. So, how did we do it? How exactly do Icenium and Visual Studio work together? Well, first, we created a Visual Studio extension that allows you to build your hybrid mobile apps inside Visual Studio using open web tech that you're familiar with, like HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. And the extension lets you take advantage of Icenium's cloud services like being able to build for iOS and Android. And it provides you with mobile app project templates and a few more things that we'll look at here as we get into it. So you get to show your love for iOS and Android devices using one of the most powerful IDEs available, Visual Studio. And if you already develop in the .NET stack on a daily basis, then it's going to feel like home to you as you expand the reach of the applications you develop. So that's pretty cool. Even better, you get to leverage your existing infrastructure. So Visual Studio is usually one part of a larger toolchain in most scenarios. So maybe your team already uses TFS or GitHub, or you've got a private Git setup or some other situation. No problem. Use whatever source control provider works best for you and your team. The extension also allows you to manage your mobile developer certificates and provision profiles. You can run apps in a local simulator. You can deploy to devices. And you can use custom Cordova plugins if they are Cordova 3.0 compatible, all from within Visual Studio. Now, since you're here, we know you want to see it in action. We thought, who better to demonstrate it for us than Chuck Norris? So Burke Holland and I put together a sample app called Chuck Facts. I'll build the first part of the app here as we walk through this, but in a nutshell, we've grabbed an online database of Chuck Norris jokes, and we're going to write a hybrid mobile app in Visual Studio using the Icenium extension. And by the time I'm done with my part of it, we'll be able to retrieve a random joke and see some stats about the Chuck Norris jokes in the database and so on. And then later on, Burke's going to add some stuff as well. I won't steal his thunder here. But in a nutshell, not that Chuck Norris needs a sample app, but if he did, this would be it. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my Windows virtual machine, and before we start writing our app, we're going to take a real quick look at the back end. This mobile app is going to talk to a service layer written in C#, and we'll run the service locally while we develop our mobile app, but we've also published this project to Azure, so once our app is done, it's going to be talking to the Azure-based services. So as you can see, this is your mostly typical, albeit a bit lightweight, web API project. We've got our controllers that define some endpoints that can be hit to get things like joke categories, dashboard stats, and a random Chuck Norris joke. Nothing too fancy really, but let's go ahead and run it locally. Here you can see we're hitting the endpoint directly to get a random joke, and as I refresh, the joke updates and so on. But rather than stare at this ugly XML, let's test the calls against our service layer using one of my favorite Chrome apps, Postman. If you're not familiar with Postman, I definitely recommend checking it out. It lets you build up an HTTP request, customize your headers, etc., and view the response and more. So I have a few requests here that you can see both against my local services that we just started, but also against the Azure-based services that I published to earlier. As we send the request, you can see here on the right the JSON response from our service layer. So we can see how requests for random jokes are handled, as well as getting category stats on the jokes in the database and so on. This is just a peek into the calls our mobile app will be making, so it's a pretty helpful tool if you run into issues with your service calls and need to see in more detail what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so let's jump back over here to Visual Studio. We're actually going to start a new project, and you'll notice alongside all the normal Visual Studio project templates, we have an Icenium project template list. This is something that the extension makes available to us. We can start a project with pre-populated boilerplate for Kendo UI Mobile, Kendo UI DataViz, jQuery Mobile, or we can opt for kind of your basic hybrid mobile app plain project. Now, I'm going to use Kendo UI Mobile, so I could choose that option, but in this case, I'm just going to opt for a plain project and I'm going to customize it from the ground up. So let's name our app. We're going to put it in the Chuck Facts app directory and click OK. All right, so we can see that our project structure and the foundational assets have been created for us. We have a standard index HTML with a light amount of hello world type boilerplate in it. And we also have an index.js file with a basic app structure and initialization hooks listing for a device ready event, etc. We're not going to keep the boilerplate stuff, but we could run this real quick and you'll just get an idea of what the simulator looks like. Okay, so let me zoom out here a little bit. And you'll notice here too, we can do things like change the device orientation, refresh the app, or reload the simulator, and so on. All right, so anyway, before we start removing what we don't need from the boilerplate, let's look at one more thing the Icenium extension adds to Visual Studio. You'll notice we have an Icenium menu at the top now. Now we could choose to run our app in the simulator like we just did, or we could build the target installer files using Icenium's cloud-based build services, so you could target Android or iOS devices and get an APK for Android or IPA for iOS. We can also manage certificates and provision profiles by choosing the options menu item. So if I pull this up, you'll see a list of my developer provision profiles. And we can also see on this tab a list of my developer certificates. We could create a cert request and so on. If you've used Mist before or Graphite, this will look familiar. Just to compare, I have Mist open in Chrome. So if in Mist we click the username at the top right and choose options, we again see our provision list as well as a search list on the other tab. So this is just showing you that this is functionality that is now available to you in Visual Studio if you use this extension. Cool. All right, so let's get back to Visual Studio. You'll notice I do have an ad hoc provision for our Chuck Fax app, which is going to enable us to deploy what we're going to write to an iPhone here in a few minutes. But let's go ahead and get rid of the stuff we don't need. So we're going to build an app.js file from snippets. So we're going to delete this index.js file boilerplate. And I'm also going to use some styles that Burke put together for me. So we're going to ditch the CSS file. We're going to be using Kendo UI Mobile. So I'm just going to drag a folder that I have here locally that has all the Kendo UI JavaScript, CSS, and images that I need. And I'll drag it into the project here to save us the headache of having to add existing items one at a time. Okay, so as you can see, our project sees the JavaScript and CSS files now. We're going to be building our index.html file from snippets as well. So let's go ahead and clear this out for the moment. And we'll go ahead and add our app.js file. And I forgot to ditch this CSS directory and copy in Burke style, so let's do that real quick. Cool, got our styles and fonts. So, in our index.html, I'm going to paste in kind of the basic foundation that we need for markup. As you can see, we have our CSS references, Cordova.js, an empty body tag other than our references to our main libraries like jQuery, Kendo UI Mobile, and our currently empty app.js. So it's terribly boring like this. So let's go ahead and add our first snippet. I'm going to paste in our layout that contains the header and footer for the app. So here's the header. It's nothing fancy, just something to show the title of whatever view is being shown. And here's the footer. Right now our footer just has one link, no big deal. We'll get to that in a moment. But our app kind of needs a view to start with, so otherwise it would be kind of pointless. So let's go ahead and paste that view in. This is the view that will show a randomly selected Chuck Norris joke. You can see here that our data dash attributes in this view are referencing a view model that we've called clean model, since it's the view model for clean Chuck Norris jokes as opposed to the not safe for work ones that I promise we won't bring up during the keynote today. But we'll add that view model to our app.js in a second. This view has a top nav bar that will allow us to refresh to get a new joke, and it wouldn't be complete without a picture of Chuck Norris staring you down, and that's followed by a binding to the text of the joke that we retrieve from the server. All right, let's save that, and we'll switch over to our app.js file. We're going to go ahead and paste in the JavaScript we need to get rolling here in our app.js. Oh, well, let's turn on line numbers so it's going to be easier to talk through the code. I'm not sure why Visual Studio has them turned off by default. Okay, much better. So the whole snippet we just pasted in is wrapped in an immediately invoked function expression, so we won't be leaking stuff into the global scope. You can see that our API var is the path to our local service layer that we have running, and we'll actually change that to the Azure-based services before we deploy this to a device. Here we're setting up an app namespace on line 5, and then on line 7, we define a random joke function whose job it is to reach out to that service layer and hit the joke/clean endpoint, and then the clean model below that uses this. On line 17 is where we have our clean model view model. Basically what we have is a Kendo observable that's going to store our randomly selected joke. And our view is bound to this, so when the joke changes, the view will update automatically. We have a refresh method that simply makes the call to the server again via the random joke function, and when we get a new joke, we update our observable, and the view would update as a result of that. Both the view model and the refresh method are returned here since the view needs both available in order to bind to them. And last but not least, we're listening for the device ready event. This is something Cordova emits. It gives us a nice hook for when our application code can kick off. Now inside our handler, we're instantiating a Kendo UI mobile application, which ultimately is what makes our app take advantage of Kendo UI Mobile's goodness. So cool, we actually have enough to run, so let's see what it looks like so far. And by the way, I can either hit start or I could go to the Icenium menu and choose run in the simulator. I'll hit start. Okay, let's zoom out so we can see the whole phone here. Our app came up with a joke already, so we can refresh that and see the joke change. We can also change the device orientation, see how the app looks in landscape versus portrait. You'll notice too there's a debug option here at the top right. If we click on this, we get some WebKit style dev tools that allow us to inspect the DOM much like you've probably done in Chrome. We can view the JavaScript source as well. This might be a little small for screen share, so I'll zoom in for a second. Here's our app.js file. Just like you'd expect, you can set breakpoints and more. Also, like Chrome, you can profile your mobile app, and you can use the console. These are all really helpful debugging tools to be aware of, because you're going to find yourself debugging your hybrid mobile apps on your desktops more often than not early on, especially because of the maturity of the tooling. So let's close our simulator. We've got some more stuff to add. In our index.html, we're going to add another view, and this one's going to utilize some of Kendo UI's charting capabilities. It's a really simple view. You can see that our data init refers to a dashboard model, and it's wrapping a div with an ID of categories pie, which is where we're going to drop a pie chart. Oh, and we need to add the link to bring up this dashboard view in our app's navbar, so let's do that. And now to add the JavaScript we need. So the snippet I just pasted in is our dashboard model instance. You can see that it has an init function, which targets our categories pie div, and it adds a Kendo chart. You can see that our data source for the chart hits one of our service layer's endpoints. Our chart has a legend, and you can see that it's a pie chart with the series value targeting the jokes member of each category returned from our service layer. It's basically going to be the percentage of total jokes which that category contains. So we return our init function since the view calls it when it's loaded. All right, we should be able to run this. So here we go. Let's zoom out again. And you'll see we have a dashboard link on the bottom nav bar now. When we click on it, we see our pie chart. Now that text might look a little bit small over the screen share, so I'll zoom in on the top for a second. You can see we have 3 categories: nerdy, explicit, and Chuck won't say. Our pie chart shows the breakdown. The vast majority of the jokes obviously falling under Chuck won't say, since I guess the creator of the database was too afraid to ask him. And of course, the random joke functionality continues to work as expected. Now, since there are explicit jokes in the database, they're definitely not safe for work, much less a Keynote demo. We'll add a quick view to our app for explicit jokes that doesn't actually show any explicit jokes. So we'll paste in the navbar link. And then we'll paste in the view. Pretty simple stuff. Now let's run it. So you can see our explicit link on the app's navbar at the bottom. Clicking on it just shows a view saying that we're all too young to view explicit Chuck Norris jokes, so there. Everything else still works as expected. We can view our pie chart. We can look at random jokes. All good. So we've gotten the basics of our app in place. Let's go ahead and commit this code. I'm using Git locally, so I'm going to go ahead and init my repo. Then we're going to add. And in my commit message, I'll tell Burke good luck. All right, let's push this to GitHub. Oh, got to add my remote. Actually, I have it in my paste queue. And let's push it. Okay, so we've created our ChuckFact sample app. We've run it in the simulator. Everything looks pretty decent. We've pushed the code to GitHub, but the real test is in deploying it to a device. Before we do that, let's update that API path of ours to point to the Azure services rather than localhost. Otherwise, things aren't going to go so well for us. And then before we build this, one other thing I want to mention is that the Icenium extension adds something to Visual Studio's output window. So we're going to show the output window, and then we're going to choose to show output from Icenium. This will give us some visibility into what the extension is doing, so I'll leave this up while we build. So let's go to the Icenium menu. We're going to choose to build the ChuckFax app in the cloud. This brings up a pop-up that lets us choose to build for Android or iOS, and since I'm going to put this on my iPhone, obviously we'll pick iOS. On this page, I can select which provision profile I want to use. You can see the list of provisions associated with my Icenium account on this dropdown. We'll use my Chuck Norris fax profile, and then I'll move this window over here so that we can see the output as the build runs. You can already see some extension output here in the window. Our code is being sent to Icenium's cloud build services, and we'll get an IPA file back here in a few seconds. Now you can see in our output window, there's a message saying that the package is successfully built and the result is in our bin/ios/debug directory. Now we could install that IPA through iTunes if we wanted, but since I'm using an ad hoc provision, I can actually scan this QR code that just appeared and the app will be downloaded and installed to my device. Talk about painless deployment process. I love this. So I'm going to use Reflector. It's a really handy app that allows you to mirror your iOS device through AirPlay. So yeah, sorry, it only works on a Mac. But this will help you see that we're using my actual iPhone now, not a simulator. So I'm going to open up Red Laser and I'm going to scan this QR code. So we've scanned it. We'll say yes to open the URL, and you can see that we're being prompted to install the ChuckFax app. Here we go, it's installing. And now let's launch it. Cool, so it loaded a random joke. We can refresh to get a new one. We can switch to our other views, look at our pie chart, and so on. But overall, in just the last 10 to 15 minutes, we've built a hybrid mobile app using Visual Studio and Icenium together, including deploying it to an actual device, my iPhone 5, and it was very painless. So I hope you're as excited as I am about the world of possibilities that this opens up. I'm going to leave it there for now. Burke's going to add some more interesting stuff to our app in a few minutes, but in the meantime, Todd, back to you.
Very cool stuff. Thank you, Jim. So a few more notes before we wrap up the Visual Studio integration. This is, of course, a beta release, and we'll be releasing our official version later this fall. So check it out. There'll be a few rough edges, but we want you to get started with it now so you can start experiencing the power of Icenium in Visual Studio. There are also a few features that you may find in Graphite that you won't yet find in Icenium's Visual Studio integration, such as managing your devices and linking your devices for LiveSync. But note, more of those integrations will come before the official release, so stay tuned and watch for that. And another common question likely to come up, so I'll address it now and we'll probably address it again at the end of today's live event. This Visual Studio integration today supports Visual Studio 2012, so make sure you have VS 2012 to use this. Most importantly, your feedback is wanted. Download and try the Icenium Visual Studio integration today and share your feedback at feedback.icenium.com. Vote on the other ideas you see there and help us really make this the best experience possible for those of you that love to work in Visual Studio. Now, some of you today may be saying, hey, I don't like to work in Visual Studio. That's not my favorite IDE. And I think it's important to remind everyone that this is not changing the other options you have for building cross-platform mobile apps using Icenium. In fact, now you have 3 ways to build apps using the Icenium platform. Icenium Graphite, which is our mobile-focused Windows desktop IDE. Icenium Mist, which is a mobile-focused HTML5 browser-based IDE, which you can access anywhere you have a capable HTML5 browser, including with the latest release, actually, on the latest versions of Chrome on Android. And you now have a third option, basically Icenium's integration, starting with Visual Studio, which allows you to modularly adopt Icenium into your existing workflows and into your general purpose IDEs. And if you're not using the new Visual Studio integration, there's tons of improvements in the latest Icenium release. Starting, of course, with the brand new improvements to the Icenium Visual Designer. Today, of course, focusing on Kendo UI, but the visual designer has lots of new improvements, allowing you to do things like work with quote-unquote invisible UI, things like the drawer, the modal pop-up, which you traditionally or you previously couldn't do. In Mist and Graphite, meanwhile, you'll find lots of improvements to the code editor experience and code analysis, as well as things that help you with version control directly in those tools. And Icenium Ion has also been updated, and I should maybe make this more of a note. All of Icenium has been updated to support Apache Cordova 3.0, the latest and greatest underlying Apache Cordova release, and it represents a significant change and improvement to the Apache Cordova wrapper. So if you're interested in building Apache 3.0 applications, you can now, Apache Cordova, 3.0 applications, you can now do that, target that from Icenium. And Icenium Ion, our helper app for iOS to help you deploy testing apps to iOS, is now updated to support 3.0 as well. But one of the things I said earlier that really makes hybrid mobile development attractive is plugins. Plugins allow you to unlock basically any native capability of an underlying device as long as you can get a little native code wrapped up in a plugin and consumed. And we were really excited to add plugin support to Icenium earlier this year. And to show you how that works and how that works in the context of the new Visual Studio integration, I'm going to invite our next presenter to stage, Burke Holland, developer advocate at Telerik, to walk us through how we can use plugins and Icenium to make our mobile application even more powerful. So Burke, come on and show us what it's all about.
Thank you, Todd. Hey, everybody. I've got a confession to make. I love hybrid development. I love hybrid development because it allows me to use my primary skill, which is web development, to build native mobile apps, which is awesome. But mobile devices are capable of really a whole lot more than just regular web apps are. I mean, building the visual portion of the app is really sort of just the tip of the iceberg. Mobile devices do things that desktop computers were never really capable of. They're interactive, they respond to our emotions, they know us like our desktops never have before. Hybrid development is so powerful because it allows us to tap into these capabilities of our device right from the familiar web environment. Now, out of the box, Cordova provides you easy access to a bevy of native APIs. Some of these include device information, compass, accelerometer. There's a lot of device access built into the framework, and Icenium exposes that for you. But what if there's something that you need that isn't on this list here? Some feature that you want to tap into that isn't provided out of the box. What do you do then? There are, of course, a ton of devices and OS-specific features that are not included here. This is why hybrid apps have, for a long time, supported the notion of custom plugins. Custom plugins are native bits of code that are added to the Cordova project along with the JavaScript interface. The JavaScript interface uses Cordova's native access to call these custom native method. There are plugins for all sorts of things. Barcode scanners, Facebook, ads, in-app purchases, you name it, it's probably there. And this list here is only about half of what's listed in the official plugins repository. And these are only for iOS. The possibilities here are endless. Icenium was actually the first Cordova platform to support these custom plugins. We've added in a few of the most popular ones to Mist and Graphite several months back. These include things like the child browser, SQLite, push plugin, and even the aforementioned barcode scanner. However, you aren't limited to what we provide out of the box. You can add in some of these custom plugins to your project to make your app really shine and take it to the next level. Let's have a look at how we can add these custom plugins to Icenium. I'm going to use Visual Studio for this example, but remember, you can use this same strategy across Graphite and Mist as well. Now, I saw Jim's project earlier and I really liked it. I mean, who doesn't like Chuck Norris facts? So what I did was I cloned it from GitHub. So I'm going to open it up here in Windows Explorer and just kind of take a look at the project. You can see all the project files here. And you can see there's a solution file. And if I double click that, it launches Visual Studio. And when this project loads up, I'm just going to go ahead and run this to make sure that it actually works on my machine. So if I just press the start button, it'll just open in the simulator, and I can confirm that Jim's code is in fact working on my machine. The API is working, the Azure API there, and I can switch between views. Everything looks great. This is awesome. So one of the first things I want to do to this app is we just updated our Kendo UI mobile to support iOS 7. iOS 7's here. It's new. It's shiny. I want to add in iOS 7 support to this application. So in order to do that, I'm going to update the files from the latest Kendo UI build and drag them right into Icenium. So the first file I'm going to need is the kendo.all.min.javascript file, which contains the minified JavaScript for Kendo UI Mobile and for the data viz for the nice chart of Chuck fact categories that we have there. And then I need to update the styles as well. So I'm going to pull in the images folder, which contains the icon fonts, as well as down here, the Kendo mobile CSS file, and I'll just drop that in. And of course, Visual Studio is going to ask me about each one of these files. Do I want to override it? Yes, 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 yes. All of these things, please. Now, I'm going to launch the simulator again. We'll bring this app back up. And you can see that it still hasn't changed. And that's because we need to go back in and we need to actually tell this application to use the iOS 7 skin. It's a completely new skin for Kendo UI Mobile, and doing this allows us to support previous versions of iOS as well, along with the new look. So I'm going to increase the font size here. And what we'll do is actually we'll jump over to the app.js file. And if we scroll down to the bottom, I have the font size. Let's scroll over. You can see here that we've got a flat skin. So if we change that to iOS 7 and save, and actually, we don't even need to restart the emulator. It just automatically comes up. And you can see the nice iOS 7 look and feel. It's very flat. Everything is flat now. Looks really good. What I'd like to do, though, is add a share icon in the upper left-hand corner, something that will allow me to share these fabulous Chuck Norris facts with the rest of the world. Now, I have a couple options here. I could open up a new browser window. I could let them go to twitter.com via a child browser plugin. But what would really be great is if I could allow them to share these facts using the built-in sharing capabilities of iOS. And to do that, we're going to use a custom plugin. Now, the first thing that I'm going to be needing is a share button. So let's go ahead and add that in. I'm going to come down here to where the refresh button is. You can see it there. Refresh. I'm going to copy this whole line and just paste it down below. And let's actually start from the beginning here. It's a button. Its icon should be share, which is built into the Kendo UI mobile framework. Let's put it on the left-hand side of the nav bar. And then I need to give it an event. I haven't defined one yet, but we'll make one called share. Go ahead and save that. And now we have a share icon. Of course, if I click on it, it doesn't do anything. And that's because we need to add in an action for that app.share that we just specified in the data click. So in the app.js file, we will scroll down and go ahead and add in this app.share function that we specified as the binding for the click on the share button. So I'll set this as a function. And what I want to do here is just test this in the simulator. So we're just going to call an alert and say, share this joke. And this is just to test that our button is actually connected to the JavaScript function. So there we go. All right. Now we're ready to add in this custom plugin that's going to allow us to share using the native sharing functionality that is built into iOS. So I actually have a share plugin that you can find on my GitHub. It's right here. It's called Social. And there's the files. We'll look at these in a second. I'm just going to drag this entire folder into the plugins on the project. And then you can see there's now a social folder. I'm going to remove this Git folder. Don't need that. And if we look here, you can see this is the screenshot of what we're going to be utilizing. This is the share drawer on iOS 6. The screenshot for this plugin hasn't been updated for iOS 7, but we'll see that in just a second here. So there's a couple files in this custom plugin. Let's take a look at them. First, you see we have this iOS and then an iOS folder under the source folder. And in that folder, we have two files. These are Objective-C files. This is a header file, and this is the actual code that's going to do the native interaction for us and going to bring up that social share drawer. The JavaScript file interfaces with that Objective-C file using these Cordova.exec. So you can see here there's an available function. There's also a share function. And in these functions, the Cordova.exec command gets called, and then the underlying native code gets invoked by Cordova. So how does this plugin actually get added to our project? Well, that magic happens in the plugin.xml. Icenium, like many Cordova-based frameworks, supports the plugman plugin XML. And so as long as these plugins conform to this plugman standard, they will work with Icenium, and you don't have to do a whole lot more work than that. But let's take a look at the actual format of this plugin.xml file. So increase the font size here. We have a name at the top, and then we have this www.social.js. That's that file. And then a target for that. And what's going to happen here is when we run this and this plugin gets added, it's going to copy this JavaScript file to the root of our project so that we can access it from our application. If we move down inside the config.xml here, you can see that we're adding a feature. And this is basically what is going to tell Icenium when it builds this to add in this social plugin as part of the native application to add these files in. And we specify what those files are, the header file and then the actual file that makes the code work. And then this line down here at the bottom, this social.framework, we need to add in a dependency from the Xcode framework, and social.framework is what we need to go ahead and add in. And by specifying that here, Icenium will automatically add that library in for us when it goes ahead and it builds this. So believe it or not, that's all you have to do if your plugin is structured correctly to get this to work with Icenium and Cordova. But how do we get it to work in the application? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to know exactly what methods to call. So I'm going to open up the README file here. And you can see this author has provided a nice README. I'm going to scroll down. You don't need to worry about installation. And here's some of the methods. There's an available method and there's a send method. So the send method is what we want. It's got a string that we can pass in as a message, and we can also share a URL or an image. So it looks like we need window.plugins.social.share. So that's the method that we'll be implementing in our JavaScript here. So let's go over to the app.js file here. And inside of that, we'll take out this alert. And what I want to do is first, I want to get a reference to the text of the current joke or fact that's on the screen. And I can do that by looking at the clean model and then the view model and then actually getting the value of the joke field there, which is always going to be holding the latest joke that's on the screen. And then what we want to do is call that plugins.social.share, and then we just need to pass in the joke, and we can leave those last two options, the URL and the image, off because we're not passing them at all, and the plugin is completely fine with that. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to add in this reference to the social.js file in our page. And if you remember for the plugin XML, it's going to copy that file into the root of the project so we can just reference it directly, just like this. So let's go ahead and launch the simulator, make sure that everything's at least wired up before we try and call this here. So if I click on this here, you'll notice, let's go to the debug. So you can see we got a 404 and oops. Looks like we got a view model error, so I must have made a mistake in the JavaScript. Let's go hop back to the app.js and have a look at that method, make sure I did that right. So let me look here. I left a very important letter off. There we go. So let's look this in the simulator again. And now if I click this button, share button, you can see that we get an error that social is undefined. Cannot read property social of undefined. And that's because this plugin is not being added in this sort of inside the simulator. This is something that needs to be done in a compile. So we need to go ahead and push this to the cloud and have it build, and then we'll be able to see this work. So let's go ahead and do that. Now to build this, I'm going to head back to Icenium. I'm going to go to the Icenium menu here, and I'm going to click on the build icon here, and I'm going to select my ad hoc provision. Now I've gone ahead and set up my iOS provision in Icenium. It's very easy to do. It's not that hard. Once you get it set up, of course, you can use it over and over again. And these ad hoc provisions allow us to actually sideload apps onto our iOS devices using nothing but a QR code. It's brilliant and it works great. So I'm going to go ahead and build this, and while I do, I'm going to bring up my favorite tool for showing my iPhone. It's called Reflector. You saw Jim use it earlier, so I'll bring it up here. And I'm going to go ahead and pull down this dashboard drawer. And this is Red Laser, which is a QR scanning utility. So when this build comes back, it's going to give us a QR code, and we're actually going to scan it. So I'm going to go ahead and scan it, and you'll be able to see me do it. There we go. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and install it. Yep. And now you can see the app's installing. It's being pulled down. And it's installed. So we can open it up, and it looks great. We're able to hit the API. We're able to look at the different tabs. Things move back and forth. Looks really great. Awesome. So if we go back to the main tab, we can cycle through some of these jokes until we find one that we really, really like and we really want to share. So now I've got that joke. I'm ready to share it. I'm going to go hit the share button. And when we do that, we're going to get several options. We can share it with messages or with mail or with Twitter, or if I had Facebook set up, you could do that too. Any of the social frameworks that you have installed on your device that iOS supports in that drawer will show up there, including just copying the text. So for instance, like if I click new text message, I can now text this to Jim or to Todd or maybe to the entire Keynote UI team. If I select email, it will drop it into the body of an email message, and I could send it to the entire company. Or even better, I can pull this up and send it to Twitter. And we'll just hashtag this with Icenium so everybody knows what we're doing here. And then we'll go ahead and tweet it out. There we go. And just like that, we've shared our Chuck Norris fact with the world on Twitter. So at this point, you may be thinking to yourself, did they really just build a native application on Windows in Visual Studio using web technologies? We totally did. And it's awesome, and you can too. I'm really excited about this release of Icenium, the new Visual Studio extensions, and of course, the custom plugins that allow us to tie in and take advantage of these amazing device features like sharing. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. We think you're just going to love the new Visual Studio integrations and the custom plugins. Todd?
Thanks, Burke. As you can tell, Icenium is continuously improving. In fact, if you joined us earlier this year, we shared a roadmap of things we wanted to do in 2013, and we've already done 2 of the major items, Visual Studio integration and custom Cordova plugin support. We're still working on things like Command Line API and Windows Phone 8 support, but stay tuned, those are in the active pipeline, and we'll be delivering those improvements soon, as well as many other improvements across all aspects of Icenium. And as you learned in our last keynote, you can now buy Icenium starting at $16 per month per developer, which really is like 1 cup of Starbucks a week. So if you can afford to give up 1 latte a week, then you can easily afford some of the most powerful cross-platform mobile development tools out there, and we think it's a pretty good value considering what you guys are going to go build and deploy using Icenium. And for everybody attending the keynote, we want to give you an extra discount. So just by being here today, you'll get an extra 20% discount on annual subscriptions, and you'll get that code in the follow-up email from today's event. So watch for that and act quickly. That code won't last long, but that'll give you an even easier way to get started using Icenium to build your next cross-platform mobile app, take advantage of custom plugins and things like that. And for our Telerik customers perhaps already using Telerik products, using one of the Telerik DevCraft bundles, we also have an extra special announcement for you. Starting this week, DevCraft Ultimate bundles now include Icenium Ultimate annual subscriptions. So if you're a DevCraft bundle customer, perhaps with a UI bundle or professional bundle, you can now simply upgrade to DevCraft Ultimate, and right there will be Icenium Ultimate with all the Visual Studio integration and everything we've seen today. So a simple path for existing Telerik customers, DevCraft bundle customers, to access all of the power of Icenium. Now, we've got a few more minutes today. We've gotten to the end here. We've got some time yet to spare. So I wanted to actually show you one more thing. Some of you may be aware that several months ago, Telerik introduced EQATEC Application Analytics, which allows you to gather facts about your software in real time on any platform. And we really mean any platform. The SDKs available for EQATEC today include JavaScript, iOS, Android, C++, COM, Windows, Mac. Almost any platform you can imagine, we have an SDK available to help you gain deep insights into your application. And when you're building mobile applications and deploying them out onto devices and they're not living in your data center, it's really important that you gain an insight into how those apps are being used, what features are being used, and EQATEC Analytics makes that easy. Now, in the workshop right now, we're working on delivering a brand new HTML5 dashboard for EQATEC Analytics, which you're just going to love, as well as one-click Icenium integration. So you can go to Icenium, click one button, and you'll have EQATEC Analytics instantly integrated into your app. But in the meantime, while we wait on those things to come, you can actually start using EQATEC Analytics right now, integrating them into your Icenium applications, and start immediately gaining deeper insights into the apps you're building and deploying. And so I just want to take a quick second to show you how you can do that using Icenium and show you exactly what kind of analytics you could start getting out of your apps today if you wanted to start. So let's take a look at a quick demo and I'll show you what this is all about. So here we are in my browser, and I've navigated to analytics.telerik.com, and I'm going to start a brand new EQATEC Application Analytics project. Basically, just create a new project that can collect my stats. And so I'm just going to go ahead and call this, for sake of demo purposes, my test app. And you can see right away, here are all the various SDKs available to us. And as I mentioned, there's quite a few. For this app, because I'm going to be working with a hybrid technology, which means my app is in JavaScript, I'm going to select that I want the JavaScript monitor, and I'm going to click Create My Product. And this is something you can do right now today. As soon as we're done, you can go try this for yourself, get started for free. What you see is that this has given me a product key, and that's the thing I'm going to need here in just a second. So let me go over to Icenium and create a new project where I can now consume these analytics. So over in Icenium Mist, I've opened this up in my browser. I'm just going to start from scratch and create a brand new Kendo UI mobile hybrid application. I'll call this my EQATEC demo. And I'll click Create. And Icenium is now going to create a brand new project for me with a few test views and leverage Kendo UI mobile for all of the UI. Once Icenium opens and loads my projects, I need to then integrate my analytics so I can track what my application is doing. In fact, before I do that, let me just show you what we get by default by running instantly my application in the simulator. So I'll launch my simulator, it's going to load my application, and we can see that I've got these default views. I can navigate between the views. I've got 4 views here, and I want to get some insights into how users are going to be using my application. So I'll go ahead and close my simulator for now. To do this, I clearly need some JavaScript. And so I'm going to come into my scripts folder, and I'm going to also open my index.html file. Now, on the Icenium Analytics portal, you may have noticed that I have a key, and I also have some code I can copy and paste that will help me grab the EQATEC monitor. This is the JavaScript file that does all the monitoring, as well as start the monitor so we can start tracking what my application does. I've already gathered these code snippets up to make it a bit easier, so I'm going to start adding them to my application. First, I need the EQATEC monitor, and so I'm going to pull in a code snippet here to help me do that. I'll drop in my EQATEC script reference, so pull in the monitor JavaScript. And I'm going to move this JavaScript to the bottom of my application just to clean it up a little bit, make it load a bit better. Drop this in here. And I'm going to need some place to put that snippet that EQATEC gave me. So I'm going to, rather than modify any of the code that Icenium created, create a new file. So I'm going to come in here and add a new file, a new JavaScript file, and I'll call it appmonitor.js. And in my appmonitor.js file, I'm going to go ahead and add my code snippet. And in here, you'll see it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to extend my global app variable, which my demo app created for me. And I'm going to create 2 methods, stop monitor and, importantly, start monitor. And this is the code that came right from EQATEC. And here is where I need to copy and paste that key. So we'll jump over here to EQATEC's dashboard, take that key that it gave me. I'll copy this. And then we'll paste it right in to my application. Perfect. So with my application monitor snippet all ready to go, I just need to add it to my file. So I'll come in here and add my reference to that new script file, script source equals scripts/appmonitor.js. You can see the beautiful code coloring and syntax highlighting inside of Icenium Mist. Really great browser-based IDE. And I'm just going to need some way to actually start the monitoring. I need to be sure to call that when everything is loaded. So I'm going to come in here and grab my start monitor script, which will call that start monitor method we just created. And that will start tracking my analytics, start sending them to my EQATEC dashboard. So with all of these things in place, I can save my application and we can run it. So I'll come in here and I'll say run my app in the simulator. Now my application loads, that's great, and I can still navigate between my views. And behind the scenes now, my EQATEC tracking script is loaded, and it's already sending information to my EQATEC dashboard. In fact, let's go check that out. If I come down here to my dashboard for my test app, obviously it takes time for most data to collect, but EQATEC actually gives me the ability to view data live. I can come click on live, and we can see there's my simulator running right now. We can see we've got one session. I can click on view details, and we see that it's coming from the browser. Actually, it's coming from my Mac OS. It's the simulator. We can see the times and all that various information. So I get immediate insight into how my application is behaving, and these other reports will start to populate as more data gets processed. But while I get some basic insight, what really makes EQATEC valuable is the feature reporting. I can tell when various features are being used and even how long they're being used, so I can start to understand better how my application is being used by my end user. So if I want to start tracking features, it's super simple. All I need to do is go back to my Icenium application, and I'm going to go back into my app monitor that we created, and I'm going to add a couple of extra events. So I'm going to come in here, or rather functions. So I'm going to come in here and grab feature tracking. And feature tracking takes advantage of the EQATEC JavaScript SDK when we create two new functions, logViewStart and logViewEnd. In here, you can see we call some SDK-provided functions, trackFeature and trackFeatureStart, to which we just provide the name of the current view. And then for logViewEnd, we say trackFeatureStop. What this does from the SDK is it sends a signal back to EQATEC telling us every time a user uses a specific view in our app and tracks how long each of those views is used. So we'll save that. And to call these events, to trigger these events, we simply are going to add a couple of event handlers to our KendoUI mobile layout. We'll come in here and we'll add this. And now when our views show and when they hide, we'll automatically call those logViewStart and logViewEnd events and send our signals back to EQATEC. So we'll save this and we'll rerun our application in the simulator. So now our application loads. We can navigate between our views. We can see this happening here. And in fact, I will open up the Chrome developer tool so we can see some of the log traffic going on here. And if we look at the network, or rather the JavaScript log, you can see I've console logged several events here. We can see that we're logging as we change between these views and as we end timing those views. So we've got our tracking code working. We can verify that from there. More interesting, though, of course, is what we're getting on the EQATEC side. So if we jump back over to our EQATEC dashboard, we come back down to live, we should be able to see our data being collected, and we should be able to start seeing our feature use. And it might take a second for some of our data to get in here, so we'll give it just a second to load up. And there it goes. Here's our data starting to show up. And we can see that because we are using a consistent naming by saying view dot and the name of the views we're tracking, it's actually going to group our data for us. And we're still waiting for some of this live data to come in. Let's give it one more refresh and see if some of our data has started to be processed and showed to us here. There we go. So we can see already instantly for the various views in our application that our home view is the most used view and the location view is our least viewed view. Well, it's a brand new application with brand new analytics, so as you might expect, we're not getting super deep information at this point. But hopefully this gives you a quick taste of how fast and easy it is to start tracking features inside of an application and start gaining real insight into how those features are being used. In fact, let's take one last look at how the timing function works as well. Here you can see all of our different views again being tracked: view home, view location, view login. If we expand these with thresholds, And we'll grab our live data set again because we don't have much data yet. We can start to see how long our users are using various features. And right now we only have a couple of sessions tracked. We can see that one user looked at the home view for more than 30 seconds, and half our users have looked at it for between 1 to 2 seconds. Here you're seeing the millisecond notation. So as you start to create these barriers to see what intervals are interesting to you, you can track feature usage both in quantity through feature use and feature timing to see how long users are using various features. And of course, there are all kinds of the great things like tracking exceptions and just actually viewing where in the world and when in the world your application is being used. Quick and easy to add to any Icenium hybrid application today with a JavaScript SDK. So I hope you check that out as well as you start building more mobile apps using Visual Studio, Icenium, and EQATEC. So with that, I think there's only one thing left to do. Go start your free 30-day trial with Icenium today if you're brand new, or go check out the latest improvements if you're an Icenium customer in your account visiting icenium.com. We're really honored and pleased to have you join us again today. Hopefully you've seen some things today that excite you and make you want to go get to doing more mobile development using Icenium and the other mobile tools from Telerik. For those of you that need to drop off now at the end, thank you again for joining us. For everyone else, we're going to be transitioning into a Q&A period where we're going to be answering as many of your questions that you've been logging in the webcast question log as we can here live before we have to wrap up. Again, everything's recorded. Everything will be published to our YouTube channel soon. And the winners of today's raffle will be published on our Twitter account very shortly as well and blogged about tomorrow. So good luck to all of you in the raffle. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us for today's Keynote webcast, and we hope to see you back online for another event very soon.